on April 26, 1986. Something happened inside Chernobyl that would change history forever. In a matter of seconds, an ordinary night became a global disaster. Today, the buildings stand silent. The roads are empty. But everything started here, at Reactor number 4. A powerful explosion tore through the reactor. The blast was so violent that it destroyed part of the building itself. Moments later, fire and smoke filled the sky. The disaster had begun, and nobody could stop it. As the reactor burned, radioactive particles rose into the air, invisible to the eye, but deadly to anyone nearby. Firefighters rushed toward the plant. They were called to fight a fire, but this was no ordinary emergency. Many climbed onto damaged buildings, working through smoke and darkness, unaware of the radiation around them. Some of these men would become the first victims of the disaster. But at the time, they believed they were saving the plant. As dawn arrived, the reactor was still burning. The danger was growing and spreading farther every hour. Only a few kilometers away, the city of Pripyat remained calm. Families woke up. Children played outside. Nobody could see the radiation. There were no warning signs, no visible danger, only normal life. But above the city, a radioactive cloud was already moving, carried by the wind, silent and invisible. Hours turned into a full day. Yet the people of Pripyat were still not evacuated. Life continued normally. Meanwhile, the damaged reactor continued releasing radiation, far beyond the power plant itself. Eventually, authorities realized the city could no longer remain occupied. A massive evacuation was ordered. Hundreds of buses arrived. Residents were told they would return in a few days. Most took only essential belongings, leaving behind homes, photographs, and memories. Schools were left untouched. Toys remained where children had dropped them. Time suddenly stopped. Within days, Pripyat became a ghost city, silent, empty, frozen in time. An entire city had been abandoned, but nobody knew what would happen next. Because while humans were leaving, Chernobyl was about to enter a completely new chapter. While Reactor 4 was burning, life in Pripyat continued as normal. Nobody knew they were living beneath a radioactive cloud. On the morning after the explosion, families walked the streets. Children played outside, and the city appeared completely normal. The danger could not be seen. It had no color, no smell, no warning signs. Yet radioactive particles were already falling across the city, covering streets, parks, and buildings. For 36 long hours, officials remained silent. No evacuation was ordered, no public warning was given. Many residents watched the damaged reactor from a distance, completely unaware of the radiation surrounding them. Children continued playing outdoors. Families gathered together. Life carried on as if nothing had happened. One location later became famous: a railway bridge overlooking the reactor. Today, many call it the Bridge of Death. According to local stories, people gathered there to watch the burning reactor during the night. Whether every detail is true or not, the bridge became one of Chernobyl's most chilling legends. Finally, the decision was made. Pripyat would be evacuated. The city had to be abandoned. More than 1,100 buses began arriving from across the region. One of the largest evacuations in Soviet history was underway. Residents were told they would return in a few days. Most believed it. Almost all of them were wrong. People packed quickly, taking documents, clothes, and only the essentials. Everything else stayed behind. Furniture, photographs, entire lives frozen in place. Schools suddenly became empty. Classrooms remained untouched, as if students had vanished overnight. Toys were left behind. Books remained on shelves. Childhood memories stayed trapped inside the city. Within hours, Pripyat became silent. A city built for thousands was suddenly empty. But the disaster was no longer limited to Chernobyl. The radioactive cloud was already moving across Europe. Days later, a country hundreds of miles away detected unusual radiation levels, and the world was about to discover that Soviet authorities had been hiding the truth. After the evacuation of Pripyat, the disaster was far from over. Scientists feared a second explosion, one that could make much of Europe uninhabitable. Beneath Reactor 4, thousands of tons of water remained. If the molten reactor material reached it, the consequences could be catastrophic. A dangerous mission was approved. 3 volunteers entered the flooded lower levels of the power plant. Their task was simple: find the valves, drain the water, and prevent a larger disaster. The mission became one of the most famous stories in Chernobyl history, and the 3 men became heroes. But they were not the only ones. Thousands of workers arrived to help contain the disaster. They became known as the Liquidators: soldiers, engineers, firefighters, and volunteers. Helicopter crews flew directly above the reactor, dropping sand, lead, and other materials onto the burning core. Every flight exposed crews to dangerous levels of radiation, yet the missions continued. Meanwhile, radioactive debris covered the reactor roof. The area was too dangerous for normal work. Engineers first tried using robots, but the radiation was so intense that many machines stopped working. With robots failing, a new solution was chosen. Humans would do the job instead. Workers raced onto the roof. They had only seconds to clear radioactive debris. These men became known as the bio-robots because they replaced machines that could not survive the radiation. Thousands participated in cleanup operations, each helping reduce the danger surrounding Reactor 4. To seal the reactor, a massive concrete structure was built, known as the sarcophagus. Built in record time, it covered the destroyed reactor and reduced the spread of contamination. Years later, scientists discovered something extraordinary inside the reactor ruins. It became known as the elephant's foot, one of the most radioactive objects ever found on Earth. Everyone expected Chernobyl to remain a lifeless wasteland forever. But decades later, scientists discovered something impossible. Nature was coming back. Chernobyl was supposed to be dead forever, a poisoned wasteland, a place where nothing could survive. But what scientists discovered decades later shocked the world. After humans left, nature slowly moved back in. Trees covered roads, and forests swallowed entire neighborhoods. Apartment buildings stood empty. Schools were abandoned. Yet outside, the wilderness kept growing. Today, much of the exclusion zone looks more like a giant wildlife reserve than a disaster site. One of the biggest surprises was the return of wolves. Large packs now roam areas once filled with people. scientists discovered that wolf populations in some areas became much higher than in nearby protected forests. Foxes also returned, hunting through empty streets and exploring places where humans once lived. Deer and elk began spreading across the zone, taking advantage of forests left undisturbed for decades. Wild horses appeared too, moving through abandoned fields where farms once operated. European bison, one of Europe's largest land animals, also found a home inside the exclusion zone. Even the rivers changed. Massive catfish were spotted in some waterways, growing to unusual sizes. To many people, it seemed impossible. Life was thriving in one of the world's most famous disaster zones. Then, there is the Red Forest, one of the most contaminated places on Earth after the disaster. Many trees died there after absorbing intense radiation, giving the forest its famous name. Over the years, stories of mutant animals spread worldwide. Movies and television helped fuel the myths. But scientists found that most wildlife looked surprisingly normal. Reality was often less dramatic than the rumors. Not everyone stayed away. Some elderly residents secretly returned to their villages. Known as self-settlers, they chose to spend the rest of their lives in the places they once called home. Against all expectations, Chernobyl became a strange experiment. A place where nature reclaimed the land after humanity disappeared. But while life returned outside, something far more dangerous remained hidden inside Reactor 4, and nearly 40 years later, it is still there. Nearly 40 years have passed. The city is empty. The forests have returned. But deep inside Chernobyl, the disaster is still alive. Beneath layers of steel and concrete, something remains hidden. A deadly reminder of the night everything changed. When Reactor 4 exploded, nuclear fuel, metal, and concrete melted together. The result was a strange material never seen before in such quantities. Scientists call it corium. Corium flowed through the reactor like molten lava, before eventually cooling into solid formations. The most famous formation became known as the Elephant's Foot. It is one of the most radioactive objects ever discovered on Earth, a symbol of the disaster itself. In the years after the accident, approaching it for too long could expose a person to deadly radiation. Even today, scientists continue monitoring the remains of Reactor 4. To contain the danger, the Soviet Union built a giant concrete structure over the destroyed reactor. It became known as the sarcophagus, a shield built in the middle of a catastrophe. But as decades passed, the structure began aging. A stronger solution was needed. Engineers responded with one of the largest movable structures ever built by humans. The new safe confinement now covers Reactor 4, protecting future generations from contamination. Yet Chernobyl continues to surprise researchers. Even life found a way to adapt. Scientists discovered fungi growing in highly radioactive areas, organisms thriving where few expected life to survive. Meanwhile, nature continues reclaiming the exclusion zone, year after year, season after season. The future of Chernobyl remains uncertain. Some radioactive materials will remain dangerous for centuries. Chernobyl is now more than a disaster site. It is a warning, a lesson written into human history. Chernobyl showed us how powerful human mistakes can be, but it also showed something else. When people disappear, the forests keep growing, the rivers keep flowing, and time keeps moving forward.